have made known to you everything I have learned from my Father.
Hallelujah, hallelujah,
Hallelujah,
hallelujah. The Lord be with you.
and with your spirit.
A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Luke.
Glory to you, Lord.
Great crowds accompanied Jesus on his way, and he turned and spoke to them. If any man comes to me without hating his father, mother, wife, children, brothers, sisters, yes, and his own life too, he cannot be my disciple. Anyone who does not carry his cross and come after me cannot be my disciple. And indeed, which of you here intending to build a tower would not first sit down and work out the cost to see if he had enough to complete it? Otherwise, if he laid the foundation and then found himself unable to finish the work, the onlookers would all start making fun of him, saying, "Here is a man who started to build, but was unable to finish." Or again, what king marching to war against another king would not first sit down and consider whether, with 10,000 men, he could stand up to the other who advanced against him with 20,000? If not, then while the other king was still a long way off, he would send envoys to sue for peace. So in the same way, none of you can be my disciples unless he gives up all his possessions. The Gospel of the Lord. I'm captivated just now by a programme on the TV on Channel 5, and it's the Pyrenees with Michael Portillo. And basically what he's doing is he's walking all the way through the Pyrenees. He starts at the Atlantic Ocean in the Spanish Basque region, and he's going to walk all the way through the Pyrenees till he reaches the Mediterranean. And basically what's happening is he's meeting people and getting to know them, getting to know their lifestyle. And he's also reflecting about his own life too. As he walks along, he's thinking about things. And one of last week's episodes, he came to a mountain, Pic de Midi, in the French section of the Pyrenees. And on this mountain, they have built an observatory. It's an amazing piece of engineering, even just to see it. It's on the top of the mountain. It's high above the clouds. It's high above the pollution level. And there's very little light, so it's an ideal place to look at the stars. And Michael Portillo stayed overnight to see the stars, to see the night sky. And they brought up this image for us to see. And I was just amazed. I actually sat in my chair and I said, wow. You know, you just look at the stars, the infinity of stars, of all these bright lights in the midst of complete and utter darkness. And you can't help but think, how insignificant are we? You know, when you look at the universe and all its wonder, and here we are on a tiny wee planet in the middle of nowhere, and on that planet we exist, and our lives are very short. You know, it made me think about, you know, just how really fragile we are as human beings. And it made me think, you know, what is life all about? In our first reading today, we hear from the book of Wisdom. And in Wisdom, he writes, "The reasoning of mortals are unsure, and our intentions are unstable. For a perishable body presses down the soul, and this tent of clay weighs down the teeming mind. It is hard enough for us to work out what is on earth. Who then can discover what is in the heavens?" I think the author of Wisdom that day was having a bad day. You know, things were weighing down on him. You know, life kind of looked difficult. There was problems. And really that speaks to our life. You know, we have problems in life. It's just a fact. And the reality is also that we have choices to make in the middle of our difficulties. I'm sure many of you are familiar with the Serenity Prayer. Grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. You know, that prayer really sums up what it means to be a human being. We need humility. That's what life is about. We need to live our life in humility, to recognize that we are small, that we have problems, we have difficulties. And there are things that prayer tells us about ourselves that, you know, we've to be the best version of ourselves that we can be. Nothing more, nothing less. There are things we can do in our life to make changes. And there are things in our life we just need to accept in humility. And then we move on to our second reading today from Paul's letter to Philemon. Paul tells us he's an old man now and he's in jail. So he can't do an awful lot. He's in prison. His freedom has been closed in. And he's writing this letter to a man called Philemon. And it's kind of unusual because most of Paul's letters are to a church, like Corinth or Thessalonica. But he's now actually writing a personal letter to this man, Philemon. And you see, the problem has started because Philemon had a slave. And the slave ran away. And what the slave did is he ran to Paul. And they built up a relationship with each other. You know, Paul says, I've become like a father to him. And they've obviously been discussing things and talking about life and talking about what it meant to be a slave. And Paul is saying, you know, there's another kind of slavery. There's another kind of slavery that keeps us all bound. And Paul talks to him, and eventually the slave converts to Christ. He gives his life to Christ. And the reason that Paul is writing the letter to Philemon is that he's now sending this slave who has found a new freedom in his life. He's sending him back to Philemon. And what he's saying to Philemon is basically this: do not receive him as a slave. Receive him as a brother in the Lord. You know, he's asking Philemon to change his perspective of this man. Not to see him as property or a possession, but to love him as a brother. And that's the second point of our life. We are to love. So we are to live our life in humility, but we are called to be people of love. And then we hear Jesus teaching us in the gospel today. He says to us, and you cannot be my disciple unless you hate your father, mother, wife, children, brothers, sisters, yes, and your own life too. Give up all your possessions. Carry your cross just as I carry mine. Now we have to remember Jesus is on a journey here. He's on a journey towards Jerusalem. And he knows what's going to happen in Jerusalem. He's going to go to the cross. And so Jesus, as he walks along, is teaching us about how to live our lives. You know, but think about it. Unless you hate your father, your mother, your wife, your children, your brothers, your sisters, yes, in your own life too. Think about that. I mean, we're sitting here this morning saying, is this good news? What is Jesus at? You know, he's asking us to hate the very people that we hold most beloved. What does he possibly mean? You know, the word that we translate as hate has a slightly different meaning in the original language. What Jesus is saying is, love, make your love be proportionate. He's not asking us to hate our mothers, our fathers, our wives, our brothers, our sisters, our children, or our own life. He's asking us to put God first. He's saying that if you love God first, the kind of love that you will develop is a love that will transfer itself to your relationships with your most beloved, So he's saying, kind of put God first, and then everything else will follow in the right order. Reminds me of a story, I think I've told this one before, of a woman many years ago. She was dying, and I was coming to visit her. And we were saying some prayers, and her husband was there, and at the end of it, her husband says, oh, she really, really loves God. He says, I think she loves God more than she loves me. And the woman turned around, she hadn't said anything the whole visit, and said, you better believe it. But then she followed up and she said, the reason I love God more than I love you is because if it weren't for God, I wouldn't have you. So that's why she was thanking God. So Jesus is asking us to be proportionate, to give up your possessions. He's not asking us to throw everything out. He's saying to us, if there are things in your life, if there are possessions in your life that now are more important than anything else, you need to give it up. And that's not just about possessions. That can be about bad relationships. It can be about addictions. It could be about all sorts of things. It's basically, is there anything in your life that's consuming most of your energy and most of your time? It's enslaving you, what Jesus is saying. Give it up. Let it go. Then he says to us, take up your cross. And we ask ourselves, why do we have to take up our cross? And the answer, it seems to me, is this. We can deceive ourselves. We can deceive ourselves into thinking, do you know what? There's suffering out there, but it doesn't really matter to me. It doesn't affect me. It doesn't impact on my life. I don't have to worry about that. We've even got a phrase for it in our contemporary society. We call it compassion fatigue. That somehow we shut ourselves off from the suffering of other people. And Jesus is saying, no, we all suffer. We all suffer. Every single one of us suffer in different ways at different stages in our life. And he's saying, take up your cross. Because if you take up your cross, you walk with Jesus and you help others to bear their crosses. In taking up your cross, you learn compassion. We don't have compassion fatigue as disciples of Jesus Christ. We have compassion. We're aware that other people are suffering and we want to walk with them and ease the burden of their crosses. That's what Jesus means when he's asking us to take up our cross. And so to be human, the whole point of our life is that we need to live it with humility, love, and loving God above all else.